woke up with a sudden gush of pain down my leg. As my vision cleared, I wondered where I was and saw the widescreen glass all around myself. It all came back to me now, how we had run off the road and into a tree. The bonnet of the car was completely crushed and smoke was coming out from the header. I turned my head and looked at my friend Andrew. It seemed that he had taken the worst of it. There was a deep wound on his head, and the blood was still gushing from it. Alarmed at the amount of blood, I forgot everything else and struggled to get out of the car. The door was stuck, but after a few hard pushes, I was able to get out. I pulled my phone out of my jeans pocket to call for help. It was completely crushed. Not knowing what to do, I ran, shouting for help, hoping somebody would hear. "Don't worry, Andrew. I'll fetch help." I kept going. For how long? I didn't know. I stopped when I caught a sight of a building. It was a hospital, by the looks of it. That's odd, I thought. I don't remember seeing it before when we were coming this way. Now was not the time for second thoughts. Andrew needed help urgently. I ran inside shouting, "Somebody help!" but stopped short in my tracks. There was no one at the reception. There was no one around anywhere. My eyes roamed at the white all around me. Not a spot was to be seen on the white floor or the walls. I went a little way further and said, "Hello? Is anybody there?" My own voice echoed back at me. I walked further and went inside a ward. It appeared that patients were lying on the hospital beds with their bodies covered in cloth. Thinking I could ask one of them for directions, I went to a bed and said, "Excuse me?" When there was no response, I pulled the cloth off the face and immediately jumped back in alarm. It was a dead body, which was decayed and maggots were feeding upon it. I gagged at the rotting smell and figured that it was probably where they kept the dead patients. A thought struck me that I shouldn't disrespect the dead, and thus covered it once again. I came near the body and reached for the cloth. Suddenly, the body turned its head sharply and grabbed my wrist. I gave a yell when I saw that its face was inches away from me. I freed my hand with a jerk and ran to the door, looking behind myself to see the body. To my surprise, it was gone. Could it be that I'm imagining all of this? Maybe I hit my head too hard. I continued walking and saw a nurse up front. She was pushing a trolley of medical supplies towards the surgery room. Relieved, I shouted, "Excuse me!" The nurse stopped in her tracks. I made my way towards her. Halfway there, the nurse turned her head towards me. Her green eyes stared at me. Her head kept on turning, and I stopped in my tracks. With the sound of bones crackling, her head turned towards me fully, eyes locked. Until, to my horror, it was completely turned at 180 degrees, and she was staring at me with dead eyes. My body became paralyzed with fear. Beads of sweat trickled down my forehead and dropped down by my chin. I was unable to move a muscle, unable to scream. The nurse's eyes opened wider apart, till it seemed that the eyeballs would fall out. Her mouth began to hang open. With the sound of bones cracking, her body began to deform. her knees bended in the wrong direction inhumanely. Whatever was before me, it was not human. In an inhuman voice, it screamed, its voice dense as it made its way towards me. I screamed and ran towards a storeroom. Going inside, I locked it. I balled up into a corner and sat down, shaking in fear. I saw that the end was near. Something was wrong with this hospital, and something was lurking outside. Something demonic. I calculated in my head how far the entrance gate was. If I made a run for it, would I be able to make it? It was still better than waiting for my death, so I got up. Opening the door by just an inch, I looked outside. The hallway was empty. I stepped outside and ran towards the way I had come. I kept on running and running like my life depended on it, until I ran out of breath. I looked up and gasped. I was in the front of the storeroom, right where I had started. Something was messing with me. I held my head and screamed, "What do you want from me?" My voice echoed all around me. Suddenly, the lights began to flicker, and at the end of the hallway, I saw a tall figure. I couldn't see who it was, but I didn't want to find out, so I ran. I looked behind myself to see that the figure was nearer. I increased my pace and pushed myself to run as fast as I could. Every time I looked behind, the figure was nearer. I reached the reception area. There was a woman on the phone there now. I ran to her and said, "Help me! It's coming for me!" The lady was motionless. I looked carefully at her. Her eyes had an insane expression in them, staring into empty space. She looked alive, but was frozen like a statue. Her mouth was spread wide into a horrible grin. I backed away in horror. The exit was right in front of me. I ran outside and didn't look back. I just kept on running until I reached back to our crashed car. I saw that Andrew wasn't breathing, but that made my heart skip a beat. Was the fact that I saw myself stuck in the driver's seat with the sharp metal frame of the door stabbed through my stomach. I could see the other end of it that shot out of my back. I was limp. I wasn't breathing. Yet I was here somehow, but at the same time, I was not.